Hey Adam, thanks so much for joining the show today.
Hey Alex, how are you, man?
Doing well, thanks. How about you?
Not bad, not bad. I'm in my fourth week of paternity leave, which is exciting because baby's starting to sleep. But yeah, taking some time off from work's been really fun to reflect on what's been happening last year.
Sweet. And to get started, can you give us a little context in kind of your journey in design?
Sure, yeah. So I'm Adam Karnas. I'm a UX design manager at Google, and I've been at the company for about 6 years. But I did a whole bunch of other stuff prior to Google. I actually went to school for industrial design, so my heart's always been in physical product design, even though it's not really what I do today. But I would say like a big through line in a lot of my work has been like the digital manifestation of offline interactions. And so I worked on a lot of really cool like police and fire equipment back in my early days at Motorola, and then worked at a couple startups in New York City that were thinking about like cool payment technology for healthcare. And again, all these sort of like real human interactions and how they show up in the digital world. Startups were incredibly important for like honestly building a lot of resilience, understanding how to like develop your voice as a designer when you're surrounded by non-designers. And it was grueling, but I don't regret any of it. And then that led me to Google, where I've been working on Google Meet for quite a while now, and I lead a few teams within Google Meet. Design team at Google Meet's about 60 people, and so we're not as big as you think, but we're still pretty big too.
Yeah, it's still pretty big, given that it's one of those Google products that just kind of emerged, I'm feeling like around the COVID time. So it's
Yeah.
definitely growing and we use it every day. So I appreciate that. So Adam, yeah, I mean, I think it's a tough time in design with AI. There's a lot of opportunity, also a lot of confusion and fear from designers. How are you kind of helping people navigate designing with AI, designing for AI? Do you think it's an opportunity? Do you think it's a threat? How are you kind of thinking about it?
Absolutely. I think first and foremost, people that want to continue making things and building things will be just fine. I think it's the way that we approach the work, which will change in the nature of it as well. So I think the reality is like the, lower complexity work, like is going to be commoditized. It's just the realities. Projects that have simple interaction design, simple visual design, not particularly complicated products, and probably products that are being or teams that are being run primarily by engineering. Those are the teams where designers just aren't going to have a lot of impact anymore, and it's not where we should be spending our time. I think on the opposite ends of that spectrum are uh, projects that a designer could pick up and build the whole thing themselves with all these incredible new tools, and that's absolutely where I think we're going to unlock a huge amount of value for designers that have been waiting for this time when they could just do it themselves. And then the opposite end, I still think there's going to be a small slice of the internet, which will become even more beautiful and will become even more of a place for designers to really spread their wings and show it. But I think that that's going to be a very small slice and probably a small percentage of our overall like digital daily diet.
So you think it's going to be more agentic and like UI list interfaces kind of thing? Like, tell me about that.
Absolutely, yeah. And this is something we're seeing unfold at Google too. Like when I talk to my designers that are working on these projects, I think it's not always clear to them that they have a role to play in UI-less interactions and agentic interactions. And I think like where I've seen a lot of interesting things happening is when engineers, designers, and product managers work together on things like the system prompt, the tone of the language, making sure that designers are keeping the team focused on the outcome the user wants, not just on the technology steps to get there.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And yeah, tell me about that part because you mentioned like that classic trio of design, product, and engineering, but you also kind of alluded to, hey, designers, now you're an engineer. So I like, how does that work? Because I feel like the roles are blurring, and maybe you have like a whiz, design engineer who's like, I don't need the engineering team anymore, or the engineering team now is encroaching on design, saying, hey, I can use Lovable or Replit, and I'm a designer now. So how do you kind of like
Yeah.
encourage those people to collaborate with each other still, or do you not think it's needed?
I think that's a great question. I think first of all, at Google, the challenge around engineering is engineering for scale. It's not about developing front ends. I think front ends are pretty straightforward, and a great written front end takes a great engineer, of course, too. But I think the reality is that like for us to bring Google Meet, for example, to the masses, it requires a ton of specialized infrastructure understanding. And I'll never be able to do that as a designer, nor do I want to spend time learning that skill. So I think it really depends on the team. But I think no matter if you're at a big company or a small company, the power of like a working prototype with real data flowing through it is infinite. So at Google, we do that, or rather, designers are encouraged to build working prototypes with real data that are hitting APIs, et cetera. And we can totally use the vibe coding tools for that. I think outside of Google, like I'm experimenting with this stuff myself, and I've gotten pretty far with deploying things that I can use, single users. And so I would say like it's a skill everyone should learn. There's a huge amount of opportunity for designers. I don't think people realize how much impact we can have as designers. That said, in my time playing around with these things, I have a huge amount of respect for engineering. There's infinite topics of like things to be solved and figure out as an engineer. And so I think it's actually what we're seeing is maybe an increase in mutual respect between the disciplines. And more than ever, we just need to be communicating what value designers bring to every project we work on more than ever.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I like that. I want to talk about Google Meet though. It's something that as a small business owner, we use all the time and are so appreciative of, because I feel like there's just it's almost like one of those products where you're like, it's in the calendar, it's gonna work. It doesn't require a lot of configuration. And I'm sure there was a lot of back and forth because some of the other meeting tools I use aren't as intuitive. You have to download something. Like, how do you think about the user on Meet in that experience, which I feel is pretty seamless?
Yeah, I mean, you really touched on a lot of our product principles right there. It works out of the box. There isn't a huge amount of setup, et cetera. I think when you and I caught up a little while ago, I mentioned kind of a story about how Meet was flying under the radar during pre-pandemic. And, it was part of the Google Suite, but it was something that wasn't given a ton of investment because we were meeting in person mostly. So I think what we saw from a design perspective is, Zoom got out ahead, had a huge amount of market capture right around the time of the pandemic, and kind of created a lot of UI paradigms, for better, for worse. So because Google Meet was like in this interesting position of looking to see where the market was going and responding to it versus like getting out ahead, we were able to look at all the things that were working really well for people with Zoom and a lot of the things that weren't. And so when we started trying to create parity between our product and Zoom, we took lots of different approaches to the UI itself and the overall user experience and kind of designing from first principles. And what manifested was a product that really worked and was really beautiful versus one that was just trying to create parity with what was out there. And since then, like our design team has like really crushed it in terms of creating new design systems around Google Meet that are now letting the product evolve into being more AI focused. And again, like Google Meet is part of the Google Suite also. A big part of our job is to make sure our product works with all the other products as well. So that's what you're saying as well.
Yeah. And what do you think about, I mean, without divulging deep secrets, what do you think about the future of this medium? Is this changing with AI? Like, are we going to be doing video communication? How do you
Yeah,
think where it should all head?
that's such a good question. And it's something I've been pondering too, because, if you think about agentic behaviors, like depending on who you ask, like agentic means like something's happening, asynchronously or outside of my view, right? So if you think about that perspective, like Meet is kind of like the antithesis of agentic, right? It's like I'm working with another entity in real time, face to face. And I don't know, I think face to face, whether you're in person or on video, will be forever important. And I think that's how you build rapport with people, build trust, et cetera. So we're always going to need that. I think what will change, and we talk about this a lot at Google as well, it's not about like success for us isn't like the number of minutes you spend on the platform. It's like the usefulness of the meeting. And so if I turn 6 meetings into 1 meeting a day and it's like way more impactful and useful, that's great. And I think our perspective is that the way you get there is by using AI to kind of track what's being talked about and organize the information. So the impact of the meeting is much larger and the information is shared with people that aren't there, et cetera.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to get to next is the amount of other startups I talked to that are saying, with something like Granola or there's tons of other meeting recording tools that like the amount of value they're able to capture from interpersonal team communications, client communications, vendor communications through agents, that this medium is actually becoming more valuable in terms of learnings and training for AI. Is that's something you're seeing as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like you think about the amount of like content we're creating by chatting. Like it's you look at a chat conversation between two people over 6 hours and it doesn't even come close to the amount of words that are exchanged in this medium. So I think it's more important than ever. And like for us, it's all about how we can make that precious time more impactful and more useful. And that's of course like on the back end, right? So after we talk about something, we have a great record of it. But what we also talk about at Google too is making sure people can show up for really high stakes meetings. In your case, you might be meeting with a client, you want to be really well prepared. And so, having an AI that can help you with that based on context you capture about that client, either from past communications with them or your own research, and making sure that's like at your fingertips and responding to where the conversation is going. That's where AI can become really, really helpful in the context of video.
Nice. I'm stoked to see how it all evolves, because I've loved this tool since we started the business. Adam, what advice do you have? And I think we touched on this a little bit, but what advice do you have for people that are trying to break into UX these days?
I think well, a couple of things. I'm not one of those people who says like, don't go to college. I haven't gotten to that point yet, because I had a fantastic time in college. I had a great education, and more than anything, like met a huge group of friends that are still really tight with today. And the big thing about that friend group is that we're in all different, industries and that sort of thing. And I think like as a designer, making sure you're spending a healthy amount of time outside the designer bubble is really important, especially if we want to become these sort of full stack builders that understand all facets of a business. And so, the college experience is great. Go to school if you can, of course. If you can't, there's infinite tools out there to help you learn. But I think the value of like really open face-to-face critique with other people that are better designers than you is the most critical piece. Honestly, like getting that feedback in the college sense is great. I think what I look for when I hire folks to my team are a couple of key things, like a really strong sense of curiosity and resilience. And I think those two words are the most important thing we need right now in this industry, like curiosity, learning the tools, following the news, what's going on, resilience, which is like, man, I learned this tool last month and I got so good at it. And now I'm realizing it doesn't matter anymore. Like for me, it was like N8N, and now I like don't need to use it anymore, but I thought I was really powerful. But the world's changing quickly. I think showing a strong attention to detail in your design work, that's what designers are known for, and that's going to be important no matter if you're designing a layout or really testing to make sure an agentic flow works really well. Being dependable, I think these are all sort of like character aspects I think people should make sure they're touching on. But yeah, my advice is like the industry is incredibly interesting. It's changing. Maybe like the traditional junior design roles aren't as common right now, because I think a lot of design leaders are trying to re-articulate what we need from a junior designer. And it's not that we don't need the support and help from people that are newer, early in their careers. It's just that we're trying to rethink about the types of roles that they would play in a business, because they do exist, but things are changing so fast. We're just trying to kind of catch up right now.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I love the curiosity and resilience. I think that applies to every role besides, outside of design as well, like especially in this time. So Adam, thanks so much for joining and sharing this with us.
Really, happy to be here.